You need a roof and I need someone to care for my daughters, the man said, his voice steady as timber. The road went silent, as if the dust itself leaned in to listen. Dawn lay thin on the horizon, a pale seam stitched between night and morning. Mariana walked it like a thread, one step then another, her skirt skimming the thistles that dared to grow from the ditch. She carried a small suitcase whose handle had learned the shape of her hand. Inside, folded into careful halves and quarters, was everything she could still claim. 2 dresses, a worn shawl, a needle case, a hymn she once knew by heart. Tucked into the inner pocket was a slip of paper without a signature and with too many meanings. Don't come back. Fields flanked the road like tired animals curled beside a fire. Fences leaned yet held. Posts wore their years like metals. Somewhere a rooster argued with the sky, and the sky, being a patient thing, let him win. The morning smelled of damp earth and old smoke, the kind that lingers after a long winter and a longer grief. Mariana's throat felt like a cupboard someone forgot to dust. She rationed each swallow as if water were a coin that could run out. Now and then she counted without knowing why. Footsteps, fence slats, breaths, as if numbers were a path back to herself. The memory arrived without knocking. A press room, of cotton bolts stacked like snowless drifts, the sharp clack of a tally board, a man whose rings clicked when he pointed, 2 pieces missing. The accusation was brief, which is how you know it landed hard. She'd opened her mouth to defend herself and felt the words stick to her tongue like burrs. Someone had already turned toward the door to show her the way out. The road had been waiting for her ever since. When the first tremor of hooves reached her, she did not turn. She had learned the difference between what hunted and what merely passed by. The sound grew, sorted itself into leather and wheel, into metal's tired clink. Only then did she stop and face it. A wagon rounded the bend, drawn by a pair of light-colored horses, steady, well-fed, patient with their own strength. A man held the reins with the casual care of someone used to animals and weather. Beside him, 5 girls sat in a row, stair-stepped by age, each carrying her own small gravity. One clutched a cloth doll whose smile had been sewn on twice. One wore a ribbon that had seen better bows. The eldest kept her jaw set as if it were the only thing she could control. The wagon eased as it neared, not so much stopping as listening. The man tipped his hat brim with 2 fingers. "Morning," he said, the word broad enough to include the mile behind and the mile ahead. "Road's a rough companion when you walk it alone." Mariana nodded and kept her hands at her sides. "It's a companion that doesn't ask questions." He smiled a little at that. "True enough." He lifted a gourd from the footwell, the cork still wet. "Water?" There was a part of her that weighed the offer against an old lesson. Everything costs. Another part, the part with a tongue like ash, reached. She took the gourd with both hands, drank carefully so as not to look hungry. The water was cool and a bit sweet, carrying the shadow of clay. Gratitude rose sharp. She swallowed that too. "Thank you," she said, returning the gourd as if it were a precious object and not simply what a living thing requires. "Name's Ernesto." He gestured to the girls in order, and a handful of names tumbled out, Aline and Rosa and Teresa and Luz, until he reached the eldest, who did not budge. "And this is Daniela." Mariana inclined her head to each. "Mariana." The little one with the doll inhaled, as children do when they're about to say something both ordinary and brave. "Your suitcase is small," she observed. "It feels bigger by the mile," Mariana said, and the girl grinned, having found a person she could understand. "We can carry you to the crossroads," Ernesto offered, turning to reseat the gourd as if he were setting the idea in place. "Sun's kinder when you're not under it." "The crossroads are honest places," she said. "They don't promise more than they are." She glanced at the wagon bed, plank, sack, plank, and climbed up, feeling each board declare its age beneath her feet. The wagon lurched into motion. Dust rose and forgot to settle for a while. The smaller girls tried to look at her without staring. The middle one, Teresa, compromised by offering a heel of bread wrapped in cloth. It's still warm, Teresa said, a little amazed at her own luck in catching heat inside a crust. Mariana broke off a piece and put it in her mouth. The bread was simple: flour, salt, water, and whatever miracle makes such things food. It hit her after so many hours of not tasting anything but the inside of her mouth. She blinked. She kept her dignity. "Warm bread erases a mile," she said. They rode. The fields scrolled past like a book no one could read, but everyone understood. Ernesto kept his eyes forward, which made his next question kind rather than prying. "Where are you headed?" "Somewhere work is possible," she said. "Anywhere that will have me." He weighed that and did not let it feel like a scale. "A person needs a roof," he said, as if addressing the road, the sky, and whatever it was that watched the two converse. "A roof needs a person," she answered before she could help it. He nodded once, like a man who'd measured the length and found enough timber. He did not look at her when he spoke next, perhaps because a direct gaze at such a moment makes things tip. "You need a roof," he said again, slower, "and I need someone to care for my daughters." He shifted the reins in his hands, the way a person shifts a question in his mind to see where it opens. "The work is plain. House, kitchen, stitches, the pay is fair. The respect is not negotiable." The wagon wheels took 1, 2 turns. Mariana held the rhythm and examined the words from every angle she could reach. A roof was a promise. Promises were drafts written on a person's future. She had learned to read fine print. "I can help for a night," she said, leaving both of them room to step back if the floor gave way. "Morning will tell us what it can bear." "Morning is a truthful thing," Ernesto said. He did not smile, not in front of his girls, but a little light moved through his voice as if someone had opened a window in a room he thought was closed. The littlest Luz leaned her head against Mariana's arm as if it were an old pillow. "There are gestures so simple people forget to warn you about them. These are the ones that save you." They rode the last curve before the homestead in companionable quiet.
The 3 days moved like a cart under too much load. Slow at first, then suddenly at the gate before anyone had finished tying the last rope. In the mornings, Mariana cooked and counted, stitched and set water to simmer. In the afternoons, she walked the rooms with her eyes and hands, committing every hinge and corner to memory as if the house were an exam and the questions might be cruel. The girls moved around her with new gravity, as if being near her steadied a spot in the air. Ernesto worked longer than he said he would, not to avoid the coming day, but to tell the fields with his back and shoulders that he would return. On the night before the hearing, no one said the word tomorrow out loud. They ate stew that tasted like something left in the pot on purpose. Afterward, Luz fell asleep across Mariana's lap, and the others let that be the way sleep chose its order. Daniela stayed awake late enough to watch the lamps burn down, and to confirm that everyone who needed a blanket had one. When she finally rose, she paused beside Mariana, and without looking directly at her, placed the music box key on the table and pushed it forward a fraction. No one wound it. The key sat between them like a small truce. Morning wore its best shirt. They washed and braided and buttoned. The wagon was readied with a different kind of care. Ernesto put on the coat that remembered weddings. The road to town was shorter than it had any right to be. The hall had a way of making even tall men careful with their strides. Benches ran in rows, the kind of wood that teaches you to sit up straight. People had come early not because they loved order, but because they loved what it promises, that the world will make sense if you are patient and pay attention. The magistrate sat at the front like a grandfather whose chair had become a throne by accident. He wore plain clothes that had learned to mean something. Mariana took her place with Ernesto at one side of the room. The girls sat behind, their hands arranged like a bouquet of different decisions. Several faces from the well, the mercantile, the church looked back. The shopkeeper with the important mustache sat near the aisle, fidgeting as if his vest had shrunk. The man with the ring took a seat halfway back. His hat brim shadowed his eyes, but not his ring. The bailiff called the room to order, a form of music that some people prefer. The magistrate cleared his throat as if to remind his voice of its responsibilities. "We are here," he began, "to listen until the truth arrives. It has a way of showing up when called properly. We will call properly." He nodded to a clerk who read from a paper that contained less of the story than it pretended to. Words like misappropriation and allegation paraded by, trying to look taller than they were. Who speaks first to what was lost? The magistrate asked. The man with the ring rose and came forward. Up close, he had a face made for statements. He told the room about bolts that didn't add up, about a tally that refused to be even. He never said the word theft. He let the word float nearby the way a wolf floats near a herd. He said he could not point to the moment of the loss, only to the fact of it. He said the mill could not run on trust alone. When a barn loses a beam, he concluded, whoever last touched it must answer. The magistrate steepled his fingers and nodded, the nod of a man acknowledging that beams are important. And who last touched this beam? The woman, the man said, letting 3 syllables do a job he had no right to ask of them. A rustle went through the benches. Mariana did not move. She could feel the girls behind her trying to sit still enough that they would not disturb whatever held the truth in place. Ernesto's hand resting on the bench beside him had calluses that could have been counted like years. The magistrate turned toward Mariana without looking at her like a question instead of an answer. You will speak, he said, and we will listen. She stood. The floor knew the weight of her feet. I managed the floor for half the day in question, she said, and her voice did not hurry. I stacked, I counted, I tied. I was told 2 were missing from a bundle of 20 at close. I asked to recount. I was told no. I asked to check the ledger. I was told no. I asked to search the loading cart. I was told no. I was asked to leave and did. You left? The magistrate said, neither impressed nor suspicious. The gate was opened, she answered. I do not stay where I am not allowed to see what I am accused of. He nodded again, storing that sentence where men sometimes store tools they will borrow later. Does anyone speak to the cloth? He asked the room, as if asking the room were a normal thing. The shopkeeper with the tidy vest coughed himself up and forward. He looked smaller up close, as clerks do when pulled from behind their counters. I saw a receipt, he said, and the room prepared to be bored until it wasn't. A boy brought it to correct a tally. The gentleman there. He inclined his head to the man with the ring, paid for 2, and wrote 3 by mistake. Mistake, the man with the ring repeated, carefully choosing a word that admits guilt while refusing to keep it. The magistrate gestured. The boy was fetched like a broom someone remembered they owned. He came forward, hat in hand, hair going the wrong way. He told, in boy language, what he had told before. He ran receipts for the tailor sometimes. He chased a man with a ring because the numbers made his skin itch. He did what his boss had yelled across the room to do. The magistrate asked for the paper. It was produced from a folder that had learned not to be surprised anymore. He read it for a long moment, so long that the room enjoyed the quiet. Finally, he set it down. And this bolt in the tailor's window? He said. Who will escort the truth from glass to wood? The tailor rose, removing his apron as if the truth required a cleaner shirt. A peddler sold it to me, he said. Not sold, promised. He left the bolt and said he would make his circuit and collect next week. I don't normally accept such terms, but I needed the color. Weddings wait for no clerk. How did he come by it? The magistrate asked. He said from the mill. The tailor answered. And then, because his conscience preferred the extra pound to the extra ounce, added, but he didn't know the difference between a selvage and a prayer. Laughter thought about crossing the room and decided it could go half as far. Describe. The peddler, the magistrate said. The tailor did. The hat that had seen too many days. The boots that had learned only some roads. The habit of looking at the door while speaking to the window. A deputy nodded, made a small mark on a page like a stone placed on a cairn. What of the cloth itself? The magistrate continued, now turning back to Mariana as if the fabric were a witness that needed a translator. She felt the eyes move. She did not shrink under them. The dye run that month had trouble with thumbprints, she said. We switched to a new vat. The color took too slowly, and hands that forgot not to touch left their marks. I carry my work with me. She held up her own thumb. I could show you 2 bolts that bear my print and 10 that do not. If the bolt in the window has a print, this court will not tell you which thumb left it. But I will tell you if the print is from a right hand or a left, and whether the press was made on a dry day. Cloth remembers. The magistrate looked pleased in the way men do when they are surprised by the world and consider it a personal favor. Bring the bolt, he said. The tailor and a deputy returned with it wrapped in paper like a promise. They set it across 2 chairs. The magistrate stood, an old tree rising one more time, and came down to look. He ran a finger near, but not on the weave. Mariana stepped forward, asked permission with her eyes, received it with his nod, and touched the edge the way a person touches a sleeping child, firm enough to be known, gentle enough to leave it sleeping. She rolled the mouth of the cloth back until a faint smudge declared itself near the 4th yard. She found another, lighter, near the 9th. She looked for the direction of drag, the depth, the angle. Left, she said. Pressed on the roll, not the flat. Not mine. The room did not know how to receive a sentence so confidently given by a person it had considered a question. The shopkeeper smiled in relief, which was interesting. The man with the ring did not. The magistrate did not take her word as a priest might take confession. He asked the deputy to fetch a glass and a light. Together they bent, the magnified world opening its tiny gates. He compared the smear with a print made on paper by 3 volunteers. Right, left, right. Then he looked back at the receipt, at the signature that had tried to be tidy. He did nothing dramatic like hold one above the other to catch the same angle of light. He simply remembered both and decided. Cloth remembers, he repeated, testing the phrase for himself. And so do numbers. He returned to his chair. The sound the room made wasn't quite a shuffle. It was a small repositioning of belief. Is there anyone else who should speak? He asked. Daniela rose. If the room had been told the eldest daughter would speak, it would have chosen a different sound to make. It made no sound. She walked to the front without rushing. She stood where the men had stood and faced the magistrate without lowering her chin. My name is Daniela Mendoza, she said, and let it hang just long enough to become real in a room that preferred men's names. I need to say something about how this came to be a matter for town. Ernesto's hand flexed as if it remembered the need to hold small heads steady during storms. Mariana felt the slow thread fear that grows not from danger, but from care.